Coercion. What is it? What is a characteristic of? Is it a characteristic of socialism or of coercive capitalism? Well, let's discuss it. Coercion, to me, if I had to define it, is institutionalized aggression or the threat of violence against people or groups of people. So when we discuss where does coercion exist, I think it exists with the state and its entities of socialism. Think about this. If you don't pay your taxes, what happens? Well, someone with a gun, a soldier of the state, also known as a police officer, comes to your door, knock, knock, knock. What are you doing? Why haven't you paid your taxes? Since you didn't pay your taxes, I have my gun out. You're going to go in a metal cage and be imprisoned. This is what our system of taxation is. Okay, when someone robs you on the road, someone pulls out a gun, give me your money, you give them the money, they drive off. That is a crime. That is theft. But when someone does it day after day after day, and they have a badge and a symbol that says government, we call this civilized society. This is why taxation, as what funds and perpetuates statism, is a form of institutionalized coercion. This happens, and we've been propagandized to think that the only two inevitable things in life are death and taxes. Completely wrong. The only inevitable thing is that we are mortal beings and that we will die. But taxation is a primitive form of society. This is it's not even post-feudalism. I mean, since the ancient Greeks defined citizens as high-class slaves. That's what we are under a democratic nation state. We're high-class slaves. We may not be in chains, but the fact that we have to pay taxes means we're not free in that regard, and that we are institutionally coerced into this system. So, I read some of the questions from the last lecture, and a lot of that had to do with this topic of coercion. So, let's begin with the market system, capitalism. People are saying, well, what about, coercive capitalism, that you're forced into the capitalistic system? Well, I think a good way to understand this is if we go back to human nature in the state of nature. So, man, from an autarkic, primitive element, surviving what Thomas Hobbes called the state of nature. Life is brutal and life is short. Man's life is brutal. It's isolated. So what does he do? He enters what's called society. Why? Because society obviously has more people, has what's called a division of labor. What is this? The division of labor is where people specialize and they exchange. This is the basis of society. This is the basis of economics. This is what we can call social cooperation. Okay, this is the economic means of obtaining wealth. The only way to obtain wealth in a market society is if you provide a good or a service to somebody else and they pay you. This is what the idea of consumer is king means. It's even if you have a market society and if you have the chocolate king who's producing the best chocolates in the world and he's become super wealthy and he's a billionaire, trillionaire, gazillionaire, he is only remaining in this position by his ability to serve consumers the best chocolates at the best prices. That's the market economy. Yes, there's no equality in the market economy because someone's producing chocolates, someone's working for the chocolate king, but this is the idea of the division of labor. Because even if you work for someone else, they're paying you. And this is what's so fundamental, is that in the market society, the entrepreneurial actions of creating new goods and services are based off the price mechanism. Where do prices come from? Prices come from our own subjective valuations as consumers. So consumers determine what prices are. And what are prices? Prices are signals. Prices are signals both to entrepreneurs of whether what they're doing is profitable and they're making money and revenue and profits, or if it's incurring losses. So profits and losses are characteristic to the market economy. All we see in the market economy is the people who made it successfully and who are rich. Okay, and then people look at that and they have an anti-capitalistic mentality and they become envious and they say, that person has more than I do. I want some of what he has, but I don't want to be a producer, an entrepreneur, produce things for other people, serve people. No. I want to use what's called the political means. The political means is the alternative to the economic means. And the political means is what we can define as socialism or institutionalized coercion or even statism. So the political means is the police officer or a bureaucrat pulling out the gun and saying, hand over part of your wealth and we're going to redistribute it. The history of governments came from the mountains, from the woodlands. They went into small villages who couldn't defend themselves and they exploited them. They took some of their wealth. And then eventually they just settled in the villages and say, you know what, we'll protect you. Give us some of what you have and we'll monopolize this racket we have so that other invading tribes don't invade you. Okay, this is the evolution of government. It's the same evolution and mechanisms that mafias use. You need to pay a little protection fee so other mafias don't hurt your business. That's what the government is. It's mafia writ large. So this is the political means. This is what coercion is. Okay, coercion is being monopolized for protection, for justice. You don't get a say in your service for protection. You don't even get to sign a contract. The police officers don't even have to solve crimes. They don't even have to repair your damages. They get paid irregardless of whether or not a crime has been deterred, let alone solved. So police is a form of socialism. The justice system we have is a form of socialism. Because you don't get to choose which services you get to use. So, furthermore, this is what I would define as coercion. Capitalistic coercion doesn't make sense because capitalism is necessarily a free, voluntary, laissez-faire system where you can choose what you want to produce. You can choose what you want to buy. And obviously, the bigger the market, it's not like a fixed pie. Okay, that's a zero-sum game. The market economy is a positive-sum game. When you create something new in the world, a new service, a new good, it's like blowing air into the balloon. You're increasing the volume, the size of it. It's like making the pie bigger and then adding more toppings to it. So it's multidimensional. Society is evolving. It's dynamic. It's growing. It's innovating. Life expectancy is increasing. Child mortality is decreasing. The amount of wealth we have is increasing. Productivity is increasing. Technology is increasing. That's the capitalistic market. Okay, the only way we can have further abundance and flourishing is if we have an unhampered capitalistic market. What we have is a complete abomination of capitalism, completely mutilated. Regulatory state, interventionism, welfare for the corporations, militarism, an empire, warfare all around the world. The debt is bigger than the GDP we have today. You're telling me that's a capitalistic system in the United States that we have? Completely wrong. Completely fallacious. No. What we have is a form of fascism, which is a variation of socialism. This is what socialism is. Let's address the question of, can under socialism you have voluntary cooperatives? Yes, but why don't we see that more in the market society? Why don't we see these voluntary cooperatives coming about more? Because of the division of labor. Entrepreneurs are the ones who are creating these ideas, putting it into place, innovating, trying to create better quality products at lower prices. However, that's risky and it takes ingenuity. And most people are not entrepreneurial pioneers. Most people are entrepreneurially acting in the labor force, working for entrepreneurs who have to face profits or losses. So the truth is that, like, we have a pyramid structure in society. For most companies, everything you like, your cell phone, your laptop, okay, your favorite movies had a king or a director. And the division of labor is like the cast, is like the hair and makeup, is like production design, is like the lighting people. I mean, I don't know exactly the order of which these positions fall under, but there's hierarchies. It's natural to have hierarchies. Anarcho-capitalism is not hierarchical less in the market society. What anarcho-capitalism is a negation of the political hierarchy. But the political hierarchy is essentially just two classes. The majoritarian bureaucratic elite, I mean, not even the majority, I mean, it's still a ruling minority. So actually, it would look more like this. You have your politicians, and you have everyone else who pays the politicians, your citizens, who pay for them. Why are we paying the politicians? For what? To do what? Why can't we pay who we want to pay? To provide security, to provide justice. Obviously, people will retort and be like, oh, well, obviously, we need the politicians to build the roads, to educate our children. But as we discussed, to actually send our children overseas to have them fight and die for wars. That's really what's going on. I mean, the whole education system is the Prussian model based off the Prussians, who were the social and geographical precursors to the Nazis. So we need this Nazi-esque system if we're going to have a democracy, let alone a governing nation state. Or what's the alternative? Freedom. The alternative is you get rid of the politicians and you have a laissez-faire capitalistic, anarcho-capitalistic society. I think that's a preferable position to having a world empire that's going to bankrupt a country into debt. Okay. So yeah, workers, socialist workers, voluntarily unite, create your cooperatives, create your companies, see how that works out for you. Lastly, this is a question from the last lecture. Is central banking developed to stabilize private capital markets? The question is essentially, is a central bank a socialist creation or a feature of capitalism? And I think the socialists in the world would say that, wow, look at central banking. This must be, because it's private, a system of capitalism, a system of the market, a creation of the market. Absolutely wrong. No. The central bank, if you look at the history of it, a good book is The Creature of Jekyll Island by Edward Griffin. In 1913, the central bank was created, the Federal Reserve was created to what? To enter World War I, to make it easier to finance going to war rather than directly taxing, which was the historical mechanism of raising revenue for governments to go to war. So in 1913, they create a central bank. They monopolize essentially the creation of money and the legal tender, meaning this law, the law says that this money has to be accepted. Okay, so now instead of just taxing people to pay for wars, we just print the money. But what happens? Prices adjust, that's inflation, and then the prices adjust, and we go into debt. And the debt's never paid off because we have a democracy. So politicians enter office, they print more money, they increase the debt, and then they're out of office. No one's held liable, no one's held responsible. Whereas in years prior, kings, monarchs, dictators were held liable for the debts they incurred. They would have to pay it back or they'd be beheaded. That was the idea of tyrannicide, of regicide. It seemed to work in years prior. But now we have democracies that are printing money all over the world, and they're creating more wars. The whole history of the 20th century was a century of central banking and warfare. We had the bloodiest century, the 20th century. We had the century of socialism, of fascism in the United States, from Woodrow Wilson to LBJ, including FDR, the Great New Society, the Great Deal. This was a society that was very influenced by Marxist ideologies, by Stalin, by Lenin, by Mussolini. Yeah, very fascinating history. So what's the 21st century going to be about? Well, if we end the Federal Reserve, we have markets for money. Once we really have the separation of the state and production of money, then we'll have the opportunity for real freedom, not this bullshit mutilated freedom. The United States, if you look at the Freedom Index, is 19th in the world, at least for human freedoms. So it's false to say that this is the freest country in the world. But this is the point, that the money we have today, and even Marx, even Lenin wrote about this, socialize the money. We have socialist money. The dollar is a fiat paper currency. There's nothing cheaper to produce. We don't even produce it. We just basically put numbers into an electronic system. So we have government money, statist money. What we want is none of this. What we want is a market for money. So you'll have different competing currencies. Metallic standard, cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin, value systems, new evolutions of money are yet to come. We're going to have new evolutions of society, free private cities, laissez-faire, unhampered, prosperity going up, population rates going up, wealth going up, no more wars. The money we have, the socialist money, leads to wars. As I mentioned, socialism is just made to go against human nature. It's meant to destroy, it's meant to cripple, it's meant to make people conform. It's meant actually to be used to kill. That's what blood money is. That's what we have today. So we need a separation of the state and money, like we had a separation of the state and church. Some people actually are in favor of state and church. I don't know which is worse, to be honest. I think state and money is probably worse because of the death toll that we've witnessed in the 20th century. Rudolf Rummel, author of the, I think, Democide, Death by Government, estimated about at least 200 million people died by their own government's hands in the 20th century. That's called democide, not genocide, but democide, when your own government kills its own people. You're monopolized. Why are we subject to this? Because we're still not yet free. That's what I'm trying to teach, is how do we become more free, and it will come from better ideas and unhampered capitalism.